A blessed day, everyone. I am going to discuss two fallacies, namely, appeal to ignorance and hasty generalization. So, what is appeal to ignorance? So, appeal to ignorance is someone arguing that we do not know if something is true or false, but then confidently concludes whether it is true or false. It happens when one cannot prove something to be true or have not yet proved that it is true. In other words, appeal to ignorance appears when one concludes such information to be true or false, even without the evidence provided. Here's an example of an appeal to ignorance. So people have been trying for centuries to provide conclusive evidence for the claims of astrology, and no one has ever succeeded. Therefore, we must conclude that astrology is a lot of nonsense. The premise of an argument are supposed to provide positive evidence for the conclusion. The premise of these arguments, however, tell us nothing about astrology. Rather, they tell us about what certain unnamed and unidentified people have tried unsuccessfully to do. These evidence may prove some slight reason for believing the conclusion, but certainly not sufficient reason. These examples do, however, lead us to the first two of important exceptions to the appeal to ignorance. The first stems from the fact that if qualified researchers investigate a certain phenomenon within their range of expertise and fail to turn up any evidence about the question, consider, for example, the following argument. Here's another example. Teams of scientists attempted over several decades to detect the existence of the luminiferous aether, and all failed to do so. Therefore, the luminiferous aether does not exist. The premise of this argument are true. Given the circumstances, it is likely that the scientists in question would have detected the aether if in fact it did exist. Since they did not detect it, probably does not exist. Thus, we can say that the given argument is inductively strong. However, does not or is not deductively valid. As for the two arguments about astrology, if the attempts to prove or disprove the astrological claims had been done in a systematic way by qualified experts, the arguments would more likely to be good. Exactly what is required to qualify someone to investigate astrological claims is, of course, difficult to say. But as these arguments stand, the premise state nothing about the qualifications of the investigators, and so the arguments remain fallacious. It is not always necessary, however, that the investigators have special qualifications. The kinds of qualifications needed depend on the situation. Sometimes, the mere ability to see and report what one sees is sufficient enough. Consider this example. No one has ever seen Mr. Andrews drink a glass of wine, beer, or any other alcoholic beverage. Probably, Mr. Andrews is a non-drinker, because it is highly probable that if Mr. Andrews were a drinker, somebody would have seen him drinking. This argument is inductively strong. No special qualifications are needed to be able to see someone take a drink. Now I will move to discuss from the appeal to ignorance and explain to you the next fallacy, which is the hasty generalization. So, hasty generalization is a fallacy that affects inductive generalization. Which, it is an inductive generalization of a group from evidence that pertains to a selected sample. The fallacy occurs when there is a reasonable likelihood that the sample is not representative of the group. Such a likelihood may arise if the sample is either too small or not randomly selected. Here are two examples which I provided. First, today's money managers are a pack of thieves. Every last one of them. Look at Bernie Madoff and Robert Allen Stanford. They ripped off billions of dollars from thousands of trusting clients. And Raj Raharatnam profited to the tune of millions of dollars through illegal insider trading. Before the next example is here. Before the last presidential election, three residents of Harlem were quoted as saying they supported Barack Obama, even though they knew nothing about his policies. Obviously, the issues played no role in the outcome of that election. In these arguments, a conclusion about a whole group is drawn from premises that mention only a few instances, because such small, atypical samples are not sufficient to support a general conclusion. Each argument commits a hasty generalization. The mere fact that a sample is small, however, does not necessarily mean that it is atypical. On the other hand, the mere fact that a sample is a large does not guarantee that it is typical. In the case of small, various factors may intervene that render such a sample typical of the larger group. Here are another two examples which I provided. 10 milligrams of substance Z was fed to 4 mice, and within 2 minutes, all 4 went into shock and died. Probably, substance Z in this amount is fatal to mice in general. Here's the second example. On 3 separate occasions, I drank a bottle of Figuettes beer and found it flat and bitter. Probably, I would find every bottle of Figuettes beer flat and bitter. Neither of these arguments commits the fallacy of hasty generalization, because in neither case is there any likelihood that the sample is atypical of the group. In the first argument, the fact that the mice died in only 2 minutes suggests the existence of a causal connection between eating substance Z and death. If there is such a connection, it would hold for other mice as well. In the second example, the fact that the taste of beer typically remains constant from bottle to bottle causes the argument to be strong, even though only 3 bottles were sampled. Hasty generalization is otherwise called converse accident because it proceeds in a direction opposite to that of accident, whereas accident proceeds from the general to the particular. converse accident moves from the particular to the general. The premises cite some characteristic affecting one or more atypical instances of a certain class, and the conclusion then applies that characteristic to all members of the class. Thank you for listening. This is Brother Bernard Dalugdog, and have a blessed day ahead.